Welcome, everybody, to the Puck Drops here. And the episode now of revisiting, we continue, of the 2014 Eastern Conference champion, New York Rangers. This was a team that, in the standings, they ended up going. They were second in their division with 45 wins, 31 losses, and 6 overtime losses. A team that was not super high in their standings with the fourth best record. They were not huge in the Eastern Conference, but they came through on a magical playoff run that inspired a large amount of these teams and a large amount of the fans in New York. Their roster was comprised of a large amount of playoff veterans that came through the flow at the most opportune time to win hockey games and to get to the Stanley Cup final. Aaron Asham, who was a veteran who had been with Rangers, he had been with the Penguins. He came through and helped with the wingers and had scored a little as well. Brian Boyle was turning into a prime big-time player for New York. Derek Brassard also was a huge offensive talent. Ryan Callahan, a big-time defenseman, turning into the offensive threat. And then, of course, it would go to Dan Carcillo, the former Flyer, and Derek Dorsett, a future Canuck. He became a good low-line player there as well. Jesper Fast, also a captain winger. He was a fast guy, a rookie that had played well in the speed game, being big for the Rangers, with Carl Hagelin, Chris Kreider, all big-time speed-type rushers. For Brandon Mashinter, JT Miller as well, and a big-time center. Dominic Moore, a bigger size forward for the New York Rangers, as well as Rick Nash, who is in his second year at the New York Ranger organization after being traded from the Columbus Blue Jackets first fall. Benoit Pouliot, former Penguin, he got placed in with the New York Rangers to play that top speed game. And then Darryl Poe, as well as Brad Richards, who from the Tampa Bay Lightning, he had known the system with John Tortorella. He came by and became a big size, big speed with the shot for the New York Rangers, as well as Marty St. Louis, another guy under that system who came and became a pure playoff player. Derek Stepan and Matt Zuccarello, young guys coming into their prime with the Rangers. On defense, Connor Allen, Michael Del Zotto, Rafael Diaz, young defenseman. Justin Falk and Dan Girardi became elite later, as well as with Ryan McDonough, Kevin Klein, Dylan McAlrath, John Moore, who was an American defenseman coming into his own, along with Mark Stahl and Anton Stroman. Marty Baron was the backup, and along with young Cam Talbot, but the star in goal was the Swedish Henrik Lundqvist. So that really inspired the Rangers to their and ending a playoff run with the talent they had. In the first round, they played a team they hadn't played in the playoffs since 1997, and those were the Philadelphia Flyers. And game number 1 in Madison Square Garden was all in the favor of New York. Now, for the New York Rangers, they got 36 shots on the goaltender Mason for the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Flyers only getting 15 shots on Henrik Lundqvist. But first, the Flyers scored first 7:28 in. Andrew McDonald making it 1-0 Philadelphia. 10:53 in, Matt Zuccarello tied it with great shots to to make it 1-1. And 8:22 into the third, Brad Richards made it 2-1 Rangers. 9:09 into the third, Derek Stepan made it 3-1. And then 15:52 into the third, Hagelin made it 4-1 with passes by Richards and Fost, which effectively ended the hockey game and gave the Rangers a 1-0 series lead. Into game number 2 in Madison Square Garden, the Flyers were able to even the series and really play into the tilt they needed to play in. New York had 33 shots on Mason, but he was spectacular, with the Flyers getting 25 shots on goaltender Lundqvist. Scoring 4 of them, the Rangers only scoring 2. Marty St. Louis scored his first goal in the playoffs as a Ranger, 4-way in, making it 1-0 New York. Benoit Pouliot, 8:22 in, made it 2-0 Rangers on a power play. But then Jacob Voracek, 14:14 in, cut the lead in half. Going to the second, Jason Akason's first goal in the playoffs as a Flyer tied the game in a power play. And the eventual game winner scored 11:18 in by Luke Schenn, making it 3-2 Philadelphia. And with 26 seconds left in the hockey game, Wayne Simmons got his first goal of the playoff year on a power play goal on an empty netter that would ice it and tie the series. And then the series would shift to Wells Fargo, tied at 1, and the Rangers would come up with a similar performance as in Game 1 to take game number 3. This was a close game again. 23 shots by the Rangers on Mason. They scored 4 of them. Philadelphia had 32 shots on Lundqvist, only scoring 1. 3:54 into the first, Stepan's second goal made it 1-0 New York. 10:24 into the first, Marty St. Louis made it 2-0 Rangers. Mark Streit, 17:18 into the first, cut the lead in half for the Flyers. 5:17 into the second, Dan Girardi made it 3-1 Rangers. And 10:53 into the third, Dan Carcillo's first goal made it 4-1 New York. And that was all it took for this Ranger team to get a 2-1 series lead. But then back to Philadelphia in the city of brotherly love, Philly got a close game, and they got the result they wanted. 25 shots on the goaltender Lundqvist for the Flyers, scoring 2. The New York Rangers had 38 shots and an incredible outing by Steve Mason. He only let 1 in. That one was 4:38 in. The Rangers again took the lead. Dominic Moore's first goal of the playoffs made it 1-0 New York. Matt Reed, 8:55 into the first period's first goal of the playoffs, tied the game for the Flyers. And 7:22 into the second, the game winner on a power play scored by Jacob Voracek, his second goal of the playoffs and of the series. There, it would be a best of 3. And Game 5 in New York. The Rangers would then play the Flyers in this game number 5. New York getting 22 shots on the goaltender Mason, and Philadelphia having 26 shots on the goaltender Lundqvist. New York scoring 4 times and Philly only scoring 2 times. 11:53 in, Mark Stahl made it 1-0 New York. Brad Richards, 8:07 into the second period, made it 2-0 Rangers. 16:20 into the second, Dominic Moore's second made it 3-0 Rangers. Vinny LeCavalier, with 33 seconds left in the second period, got the first goal for the Flyers, a power play tally. And then with less than 2 to go in the third, with the empty net, Claude Giroux made it a 1-goal game. But then with 15 seconds left, Brian Boyle's first goal of the playoffs, an empty netter, made it 4-2 Rangers and put the game out of reach. And back to Wells Fargo, the Rangers would go with a chance to go to the second round. That would not happen. The Rangers would tally 36 shots on Mason. He was spectacular, stopping all but 2. The Philadelphia Flyers had 29 shots on goal. They got 5 goals on Lundqvist. Simmons, 7:08 in, his second goal of the playoffs, a power play goal, made it 1-0 Philadelphia. 1:32 into the second, Wayne Simmons' third goal of the playoffs made it 2-0 Flyers. Eric Gustafsson from Braden Coburn, 14:17 in, made it 3-0 Philadelphia. From Voracek and Giroux on a power play goal, 15:19 to the second period, Simmons got a hat trick, his 4th of the playoffs and 3rd of the hockey game, making it 4-0 Philadelphia. 13:26 into the third, Carl Hagelin's second goal of the playoffs finally scored for the New York Rangers. 15:49 into the third, Claude Giroux, unassisted, ended up getting It's a 5-1. With 57 seconds left in the third period, Zuccarello was able to get a great pass from Pouliot and score past Mason, but it would not have been in time or enough, and the Flyers would take a 5-2 win and go back to New York for 7. And a close, big-time game this would be, and Lundqvist would step up as he did in the Game 7 the previous year in the first round against the Washington Capitals. He played well against Philadelphia in this one. New York had 33 shots on Mason, and they scored 2 goals. The Flyers had 27 shots on Lundqvist, only scoring 1. Dan Carcillo, 3:06 into the second after a scoreless first. The former Flyer made it 1-0 New York Rangers. Benoit Pouliot got the game-winning goal, 11:46 in from Anton Stroman and Derek Brassard, which would make it 2-0 Rangers. 4:32 into the third, Jason Akeson from Braden Coburn and Matt Reed would cut the lead in half. But that would be it for the final, and the Rangers would head to the second round of the playoffs and go to play the Pittsburgh Penguins, the division champions. And the Penguins and the Rangers would face their first playoff series meeting since 2008, when the Penguins beat them in 5 to go to the Eastern Conference Final. Now, the Rangers trying to go to the Eastern Conference Final for the second time in 3 years. Game number 1 would go to Consol Energy Center in Pittsburgh with the Penguins, who had dispatched of the Columbus Blue Jackets in 6. This game would go to overtime, and Pittsburgh would have 36 shots on Lundqvist in a losing effort, and the New York Rangers would have 3 goals against Marc-Andre Fleury on 27 shots. Benoit Pouliot's third goal of the game would go and make it 1-0 New York. Brad Richards, 17:03, would make it 2-0 Rangers. And then Lee Stempniak would get the Penguins back in the hockey game, 7:15 in from Bo Bennett and Marshall Gauck, 2-1. James Neal, 13:28 into the second period, would tie the hockey game. Then it would go to overtime, 3:06 in. And Derek Brassard, after a play by Pouliot where he poked the puck in, but it just went to the side, Brassard would seem to hit the post, and then Pouliot would then score. But Brassard's goal actually went under the post after further review, and the Rangers anyway would end up getting the overtime winner and a 1-0 series lead against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Game 2 was a lot different, as Lundqvist was overwhelmed, 3-0, and Fleury played his best game all playoff. 22 shots by the Rangers on Marc-Andre Fleury, stopping every single puck. 35 shots by the Pittsburgh Penguins on Henrik Lundqvist, and 3 goals scored. Chris Letang, 10:26 into the second after a scoreless first from Chris Kunitz and Yevgeny Malkin, made it 1-0 Pittsburgh. Jussi Jokinen, 16:30 into the third on a power play, made it 2-0 Pittsburgh, and Yevgeny Malkin on an empty netter from Chris Letang, his 4th of the playoffs with 54 seconds left, made it 3-0 Pittsburgh, and would tie the series going back to New York. Almost an exact replica in Madison Square Garden, where Pittsburgh was able to pepper Henrik Lundqvist, and Fleury was insane again. 35 shots by the New York Rangers on Fleury, and he stopped them all. The Pittsburgh Penguins had 15 shots on Lundqvist, and Lundqvist let in 2 goals. 2:34 into the second from Bertuzzo and Kunitz, the first goal of the playoffs for the captain, Sidney Crosby. He would make it 1-0 Penguins. 15:20 into the second, Jussi Jokinen would make it 2-0 Pittsburgh. And then the series would go to game number 4. There, the Rangers desperately trying to tie the series at 2-2, but the Penguins found a way to come back and stifle the Rangers' shots on goal again. The Rangers only had 15 shots on goal on Fleury. They had a better amount of goals with 2, but the Penguins bested with 27 shots on goal and 4 goals past Henrik Lundqvist. 2 past Marc-Andre Fleury. 2:31 into the first period, Yevgeny Malkin got his 5th goal of the year from Sidney Crosby to make it 1-0 Pittsburgh. Carl Hagelin's 3rd goal of the playoffs, 5:30 into the second period, tied the game at 1 against his future team. Brandon Sutter, 8:27 into the second period, made it 2-1 Penguins on a shorthanded goal. And then 7:02 into the third from James Neal, Jussi Jokinen would get to be what would end up being the game-winning goal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. 13:07 into the third, the lead would be cut in half for Zuccarello, but then Kunitz would score 57 seconds later to make it 4-2 Pittsburgh Penguins. And back to Consol Energy Center, the Rangers and Penguins went with Pittsburgh trying to go to the conference final for the second straight year. And all they would need to do is get one win. On to Game 5 they went, and the Rangers dominated. 35 shots on Marc-Andre Fleury. They scored 5 goals. The Pittsburgh Penguins had a whopping 32 shots on Lundqvist, but he was stellar, only letting in 1. 9:36 into the first, the Rangers started fast, and they got Kreider to score 1-0. Derek Brassard, 15:23, and made it 2-0 New York. Then it went to the second period, and Yevgeny Malkin cut the lead in half for the delight of the Pittsburgh fans and faithful. 3:23 into the second. Derek Brassard, 7:58 in, would make it 3-1 Rangers. Ryan McDonough, 8:48 in, would make it 4-1 New York on a power play goal. And Kevin Klein, 17:31 in, would make it 5-1 New York. Going back to Madison Square Garden, still alive in the series. Pittsburgh would have 37 shots on Lundqvist in this game, in Game 6, but only getting 1 goal. The New York Rangers would have 29 on Fleury, and they scored 3 goals. And again, it was the Rangers who struck first. 3:34 in, it was Marty St. Louis to make it 1-0 New York. 6:25 into the first period, Carl Hagelin made it 2-0 Rangers. 16:56 in, Brandon Sutter cut the lead for the Penguins' first goal for Pittsburgh. Then Brassard, 15:30 into the second, ensuring Hagelin's being the game winner, made it 3-1 Rangers and sent it back to Western Pennsylvania for a game number 7. And the Penguins would choke up 3-1 in the series to lose this game because once again, the Rangers would strike first with 20 shots on Fleury, scoring 2 of them in a victorious effort. Pittsburgh would have 36 shots on the goaltender Lundqvist, only scoring 1 goal. 5:25 in, Brian Boyle from John Moore and Derek Dorsett would make it 1-0 New York. Jussi Jokinen from Olli Määttä and Yevgeny Malkin, 4:15 into the second frame, would tie the game. And then Brad Richards' 4th goal of the playoffs, 7:56 into the second period, would make it 2-1 on a power play goal, the game winner, the eventual series winner. And New York would move on to the conference final to face another shocking team, one that went on the road to play the Tampa Bay Lightning and beat them on the road, and the Boston Bruins, President's Trophy champs, on the road as well, in the Montreal Canadiens, a team that hadn't been to the conference final in 4 seasons since losing to the Flyers in 5 in 2010. There, the Montreal Canadiens, for the first time all season long in the playoffs, at home ice in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they would be absolutely rattled by an inspired Ranger team. 28 shots on goal for New York and 22 shots by Montreal on the goaltender Henrik Lundqvist. For the Canadiens, their goaltender was Carey Price, their star that had helped them all season long. In 4:35 into the first, though, Price was beaten by the Montreal native St. Louis 1-0. Matt Zuccarello, 6:27 in, scored his 4th goal of the playoffs, making it 2-0 Rangers. Rene Bourque, 12:38 into the second, cut the lead in half for the Canadiens by passes by Brian Gionta and Lars Eller. With 1:01 in the second period, Kreider made it 3-1 Rangers. Brad Richards, with 12 seconds left in the second period, made it 4-1 New York. 1:28 into the third, McDonough made it 5-1 New York on a power play goal. Derek Stepan, 4:11 into the third, made it 6-1 Rangers on a power play goal. Rick Nash, 4:36 into the third, made it 7-1 New York on a power play tally. And then 15:22 in the third, the second and only other goal, but the Montreal Canadiens on a shorthanded attempt by Lars Eller made it 7-2. New York would play Montreal in the Bell Center for game number 2. And Montreal found a way in a regulation game to absolutely smash Lundqvist with shots, but he was at an all-star level. 41 shots, only 1 goal given up by New York. New York had 30 shots on Carey Price and scored 3 goals on the Canadiens' goaltender. And also a Carey Price injury at the end of the game would choose for game number 3 the rookie Dustin Tokarski to come in. 6:14 into the first, though, Max Pacioretty made it 1-0 Montreal. 6:31 into the first, about 22 seconds later, Ryan McDonagh would make it 1-1, his 3rd goal of the year, playoff year. Rick Nash, with 1:02 left in the first period, make it 2-1 Rangers, the eventual game-winning goal. And 8:03 into the second, Marty St. Louis continued his hot streak, making it 3-1 in a power play. The 2-0 series lead, Montreal headed to Madison Square Garden trying to get back into the series. The Rangers trying to take a 3-0 stranglehold. Montreal would have to fight through overtime to get the win, and they would. New York had a memorable 37 shots on Dustin Tokarski, and Montreal had 25 shots on Henrik Lundqvist. But New York would end up losing. 15-18 into the first, Carl Hagelin made it 1-0 Rangers with his 5th goal of the playoffs. Andrei Markov, 3:20 into the second, tied the game at 1. And then Danny Briere's 3rd goal of the playoffs, and as a Canadian, 16:58 into the 3rd period would give the Canadiens the lead. And then with 29 seconds left in the 3rd period, with Lundqvist pulled, Chris Kreider would find a way to feather it past Tokarski, tying the game at 2. But 1:12 into overtime, off a side and a great pass by Tomasz Plekanec, Alexander Galchenyuk's 1st goal of the playoffs for the Montreal Canadiens and 2nd goal in the playoffs ever as a Montreal Canadian, would give the Canadiens the win 3-2 in Madison Square Garden and give them life going back to game number 4 in MSG. And it was a very similar story in game 4, except the roles were reversed. The New York Rangers took 29 shots on goal on Montreal and 29 shots on goal, another overtime game for the Canadiens on Lundqvist and for the Rangers on Tokarski. Again, Hagelin scored first, his 6th goal of the playoffs, a shorthanded one, 7-18 in to make it 1-0 New York. Francois Bouillon, 8:08 into the second, tied the game for the Canadiens. Brassard, with 56 seconds into the second period, made it 2-1 left in the second period, made it 2-1 Rangers. Subban's 1st goal since round 2 against the Boston Bruins, 2 minutes into the 3rd, would tie the game on a power play. And then as the puck was being raced, Richards across the center ice in overtime, and Carl Hagelin was able to find a miscue in Markov, who Markov had played a great game the previous game, but Markov was fatigued. He lost the puck. Hagelin gave it to St. Louis, and St. Louis skated on his own, found a top side over the head of Dustin Tokarski, and scored a wonderful winner to make it 3-2 in favor of the New York Rangers. It gave them a 3-1 series lead, and this was right after Marty St. Louis had heard, after going back to Montreal, that his mother had passed away, and he was able to win the hockey game for her and the New York Rangers organization. This is why we play sports, for stories like those and these. And so St. Louis was going back to the Bell Center for the Rangers with a chance to win the conference in Montreal, in his hometown. The Canadiens would spoil the party, however. They had 28 shots on Lundqvist, and the puck was juiced, winning 7-4, and the Rangers only getting 27 shots on Dustin Tokarski. 1:48 to the first, the hero of Game 3, Alex Galchenyuk, came back and made it 1-0 Canadiens on a power play goal. 10:44 into the first, Eric Stepan's 4th goal of the playoff year, tied the game for the Rangers. Tomasz Plekanec from Brian Gionta and Alex Galchenyuk, 12:24 into the first, made it 2-1 Canadiens. 3:44 into the second, Pacioretty made it 3-1 Canadiens from Brendan Gallagher and Andrei Markov. Rene Bourque from Lars Eller and Tomas Vanek, 6:54 into the second, made it 4-1 Habs. 9:48 into the second, Nash cut the lead in 4-2. Then Derek Stepan cut the lead in half, 12:06 into the second. Then Kreider, 14-12 into the second period, tied the game on a power play. But then Rene Bourque, 15-10 into the second period, ended up getting the eventual game winner, making it 5-4 Canadiens. 6:33 into the third, Rene Bourque scored a second one to make it 6-4 Canadiens. And David Desharnais, 15:43 into the third, the future Oiler would make it 7-4 Montreal and send the series back to the Big Apple, still alive. But that would be it for the Montreal Canadiens, as Henrik Lundqvist would get his first shutout since that second round, and New York would get a whopping 32 shots on Dustin Tokarski. He was very good, but they only scored once, but it was the game winner. Montreal had 18 shots on Lundqvist, and he steered every shot. With 1:53 remaining in the second period, Dominic Moore scored the eventual game winner, the only goal to make it 1-0 Rangers, win Game 6 and send the New York Rangers to the Stanley Cup Final for the first time in 20 seasons since beating the Canucks in 1994. There they would face a high-flying, magical team, the Los Angeles Kings, that had been to the Stanley Cup Final before, but had been down 3-1, 3-0 in the first round, 3-1 in the second round, giving up a 3-1 series lead before winning it in double overtime in Game 7 in the conference final against the Chicago Blackhawks, winning 3 Game 7s on the road in San Jose, in Anaheim, and in Chicago. And so both these teams were magical, deep teams. Nobody expected who to win. And this first one went to an overtime game, game number 1. Los Angeles had 43 shots on Henrik Lundqvist, beating him 3 times, including the overtime winner. New York had 27 shots on Jonathan Quick, the Conn Smythe winner from 2012. 13:21 in, Benoit Pouliot scored again, making it 1-0 fourth goal in the playoffs for the Rangers. 15:03 in, Hagelin on a shorthanded goal made it 2-0 New York. 17:33 into the first, though, Clifford cut the lead in half for the Kings, and then 6:36 into the second, Drew Doughty tied the game for Los Angeles, and would go all the way to overtime. And 4:36 into overtime, Mr. Game 7, Mr. Overtime, former Hurricane Justin Williams from Brad Richards would make it 3-2 with his 8th goal of the year, playoff year, and win the Kings Game 1 in overtime, heading to Game number 2. Game number 2 again went past 3 periods. This one went to 5. A double overtime game and a beautiful game for Game number 2. New York had, in all 5 periods, 38 shots on Jonathan Quick, beating him 4 times, but not enough for the winner. Los Angeles had 44 shots on the goaltender, Henrik Lundqvist, ending up with 5 goals, including the winning goal in double overtime. And once again, the Rangers scored twice unanswered first. 10:48 in, it was Ryan McDonagh's 4th of the year in the playoffs. Then with 1:14 left in the first period, Zuccarello's 5th of the year made it in the playoffs, made it 2-0. Then Jarrett Stoll, 1:46 into the second, cut the lead in half for the Kings. Marty St. Louis got it to 3-1 on a power play goal, 11:24 in. Willie Mitchell, 14:39 into the second, with passes by Justin Williams and Slava Voinov, made it 3-2, still in favor of the Rangers, a power play goal. Brassard from Zuccarello, 14:15 into the second, made it 4-2 Rangers, but that was it for New York. Dwight King, 1:58 into the third, made it 4-3, and the former Ranger sniped his former team, Marian Gaborik, 7:36 into the third, tied the game for the Kings. It would go to double overtime, and 10:26 into double overtime from Willie Mitchell and Anze Kopitar. Dustin Brown, the captain, would just shoot it past the glove side of Henrik Lundqvist to give the Kings more overtime magic and a 2-0 series lead. There, the series would switch to New York, but just as the Kings had done 2 years prior, against the New Jersey Devils, they were able to get that 3-0 series lead that would help them in the series. New York would get 32 shots on the goaltender Quick, and the Kings only 15 shots on Lundqvist, but they scored 3 times, and New York couldn't crack Jonathan Quick. With a second left in the first period, Jeff Carter, roaming on the Ranger side, ended up getting that 1-0 lead for Los Angeles. 4:17 into the second, Jake Muzzin made it 2-0 on the power play goal, and the other Richards, not Brad, but Mike Richards, 17-14 into the second, made it 3-0 Kings. A shutout for Quick, and that would be it for Game 3. The third one-goal game in 4 nights and 4 games for the New York Rangers and the Kings, but the Rangers would not be swept in this one. The Kings, in a regulation game, had an unbelievable 41 shots on Henrik Lundqvist, and Henrik Lundqvist played to the top of his ability. New York getting 19 shots on Quick, scoring 2 of them. Benoit Pouliot, 7:25 into the first, made it 1-0 Rangers. When the Rangers needed some magic, they got it from Pouliot. And the other guy that had helped, 6:27 into the second period, Marty St. Louis' 8th goal in playoffs, made 2-0 the eventual game winner, because 2 minutes later, Dustin Brown would score for the Kings, but it would not be enough, and the Rangers would stave off elimination and go back to Staples Center. But the fatigue in Game 2 proved to be too much, and another double overtime game, this going in the Kings' favor. The Rangers, in all 5 periods, would have 30 shots on the goaltender Quick, and LA would have 51 shots while getting 3 past Henrik Lundqvist, including the winner. It was Justin Williams' 9th goal of the season to start for the Kings for the first time since Game 3 that the Kings would score first. 6:04 into the first period. Second time in 5 games to make it 1-0 LA. Chris Kreider, 15:37 into the second, would tie the game on a power play. With 30 seconds left in the second period, Brian Boyle on a shorthanded goal would make it 2-1 New York. And then 7:56 into the third, Gabrick on a power play would tie the game for the Kings at 2. Then it would go to overtime and then double overtime. And as the Rangers were moving the puck well with Brassard and McDonough, the Rangers wanted to change, but they couldn't. And their offensive guys were so gassed that as Kyle Clifford brought it across center, he gave it on to Tyler Toffoli, who felt that he had room, was able to wind a nice snapshot right off the left blade of Henrik Lundqvist, but it was a real juicy rebound that skated to the top of the crease. And pulling away was the hero of Game 7 against Chicago in the conference final in the West, Alec Martinez, who scored his 5th goal of the playoff year right over the top of Henrik Lundqvist. And for the first time since 2010, a goal in overtime won the Stanley Cup, and LA won at home. An amazing overtime Stanley Cup game-winning goal, and an amazing, unforeseeable season by the New York Rangers was completely taken aback and thrown away due to the depth and offense of the Los Angeles Kings. But you cannot forget that New York Ranger team, and what a year it was. It's wonderful to see and hear about. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Next one we'll do is a revisiting Eastern Conference final of the 2015 Tampa Bay Lightning. We'll go through them, then the Sharks, Predators, and Vegas afterwards. Maybe the team that ends up losing the series this year. I do want to go back and forth if I can throughout the entire league. So obviously the 90s once we're done with this decade. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Have a good day and a happy hockey.